am I, not planning enough so that every day feels like I'm holding on to the back of a train rather than driving it?
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I am co-presenter, and today Joe's interviewing Eric Partaker. Eric is a CEO mentor, author and peak performance expert. He has been named CEO of the Year at the 2019 Business Excellence Awards, one of the top 30 entrepreneurs in the UK 35 and under by Startups magazine, and among Britain's most disruptive entrepreneurs by The Telegraph. Eric has advised Fortune 50 CEOs while at McKinsey, helped build Skype's multi-billion-dollar success story, and has founded several businesses. His work has been featured on over 7 major TV stations in The Wall Street Journal and The Economist. He has also appeared as a guest judge on The Apprentice with Lord Alan Sugar. Eric is certified as a peak performance coach and has also completed a coaching certification and apprenticeship with Professor B.J. Fogg, who leads Stanford University's Behavior Design Lab. He continues to research evidence-based studies in psychology, neuroscience, habit change, leadership, and peak performance. In 2020, Eric released his new book, The 3 Alarms, a simple system to transform your health, wealth, and relationships forever. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Eric Partaker of ericpartaker.com. Welcome, Eric. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, very excited to be here. And thanks to all those listening for your time. Appreciate that too.
Lovely. So start by telling us a bit about who you are, what you do, and crucially, where you do it.
Yes. So my name is Eric Partaker. I work as a peak performance coach, mostly for founders and CEOs of businesses, typically between about 1 and 10 million in sales, mostly in the tech industry, but also outside of that. I live in London with my wife, who's from Brazil, and I have 2 boys, a 15-year-old and a 7-year-old. And I've just done a variety of things throughout life. Was a consultant with McKinsey Company for a while, helped build up Skype in its early years before we sold it to eBay. Built a chain of Mexican restaurants in London, and now focus on peak performance.
Wow, even just those 2 things, Skype and Mexican restaurants, intrigue me.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you know, anybody listening is like, is he just reading off random things right now?
Has he got his bio muddled up with someone else's on LinkedIn and he's reading the 2 together?
Yeah. It's like that's not a bio, that's like a Frankenstein bio.
So my next question is pretty much always, how did you get to do what you got to do? And I guess that's partly what we've started to flippantly talk about. And so, you know, the peak performance thing intrigues me. I'm wondering where that's come from too. But I think we need to go back further than that and find out the link between those two jobs. Yeah.
So I grew up. So I'm half Norwegian, half American. From the age of about 5, I grew up in Chicago, and if you grew up in Chicago, at the time I was growing up there, it had the 2nd largest population of Mexicans. So to grow up in Chicago and not have a lot of Mexican friends and loving Mexican food is kind of abnormal. So it's kind of in my blood, the Mexican food side of things, you know, from that point. And at one point, in life, I ended up moving back to Norway. And when I was in Norway, I started using Skype, given its Scandinavian roots, much earlier than most people. And when I moved down to London, I kept my eye on the company and then just knocked on the door. There were about 30 or so people at the time and joined. And yeah, it was just an absolute rocket ship of a journey. We grew from 30 or so people to about 500, sold to eBay for about $4 billion. And after Skype, I was sat on my sofa thinking, okay, well, what should I do next? And that was literally when such a simple next step. I just thought, well, when in life did work not feel like work? When was it, just like pure fun? And I thought, well, it was when I was working in the restaurant industry, which I did when I was in university in Chicago. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I should look to do something, in the restaurant space. And I was missing Mexican food, having grown up on it in Chicago. I looked around, saw that there was nothing really available, and put all that together. Asked the guy that I work with together at Skype what he thought about, starting a Mexican restaurant chain. And we were both like, yeah, thumbs up, let's do it. And so that's how that started.
Like you do. I love the fact that you did actually think about, a time when you loved what you were doing and then actually brought that into the next step. It's something a lot of people would say was a brilliant thing to do, but not many people would do, particularly when it was so diverse to what you'd been doing.
Yeah, I think I've found that there's always been for every step of my journey, there was like a very strong force or a very strong reason why I ended up doing that next thing. And the shift from Skype to Mexican food was very much about going back into my past and thinking, what was it that I most enjoyed? It hasn't been the only factor that I've used to make my career decisions. My very first job was with McKinsey Company as a consultant, and that was driven by wanting to be challenged. I knew that that environment is very, it's a meritocracy. They really push you. You learn a lot. And I really wanted that. And so that wasn't, driven by anything other than wanting to get into an environment where I would be really challenged, really, really pushed. And then this most recent foray into peak performance, coaching, that's been driven by a different factor, which is a desire to help other people unlock their full potential, which was linked back to me having wanted to do this for all of my career. So very much like an external manifestation of something that's always been kind of deep within me. Ever since I came across Abraham Maslow's quote that he estimated only 2% of people operate at their full potential, I thought, gosh, okay, I want to join the 2% club.
Yeah. So when you said peak performance, my initial thought went to sport. Is that something that's been in there in the past and that drove it too, or is that just my prejudices or not, whatever the opposite is, my positive prejudices on peak performance being connected in that way?
Yeah, I don't really think of it that way, although there's a lot that I take from sports and into my coaching. So for example, if you want to achieve peak performance in sports, you have to look at not just what's going on the field, but what's going on off the field as well. Yeah. And I certainly take that holistic approach to the coaching that I do. But I think of peak performance as simply a path to reaching that 2% club, to reaching, to becoming all that you're capable of being, closing the gap, between your current and best self. And there's lots of different routes and paths. You could do it through spirituality. You could do it a million different ways. But for me, I think of peak performance as simply operating at your, highest level in the areas of life that matter most. So across the health front, across, the wealth front and the home front.
Yes. Yeah. So how did that transition happen? So, when we last looked at your corporate career, you were running a series of Mexican restaurants and now you're coaching people around peak performance. What was that transition like? How did you go about
So the culture that I had built at the Mexican restaurant chain was all about helping people reach their full potential. So really the coaching ended up being an external kind of, an export of the culture that I had been building over the last decade. And that was the part of the business which I really enjoyed, the most. So the coaching, mentoring for me ends up being taking the part that I had the most fun with in my kind of previous life, and then doing that, 100%, full time. And that's just really blossomed over the last, year or two. It's myself in the business, my wife, and we have a guy who runs all the operations, within the business, creative person who helps us do the video, audio, content production, and a few different agencies depending on what the business function is that we use for support or specialist advice in different areas. So it's really turned into a big thing in a short space of time, but much more fulfilling since I'm able to focus on the exact thing that I most enjoyed in that previous burrito and taco life.
Yes, yeah. I just want to come back to that again, the whole thing about sort of picking the things that you enjoy and you're good at, because so many people sort of want to do that and know that or think that ought to be what they do, but so many people don't actually do it. Was there an inspiration? You talked about the quote, but growing up, or did you see something? What made you know all the way through that was so important to find that thing that you really enjoyed and to go after that?
To be honest, I didn't know it all the way through. I've just been, my son had one of my boys, the 15-year-old. He asked me at one point, how did you figure out what you wanted to do, and how did you think that through, and what should I be doing? And I just said to him, you can literally just do whatever you want as long as you just work hard enough and just connect the dots, and just connect to the people who have the expertise or can give you the training that you need to excel. So I can't really say that I've always wanted to do this. I think that the underlying motivation, though, the common thread throughout all of those things, from the consulting to Skype to the restaurant chain to the coaching now, has been this obsession with wanting to reach my fullest potential. And that probably is driven mostly by fear and feeling that I was far from it, growing up. So when I was growing up, I always really tried very, very hard academically to get to the very top of the class. And I think at best, in a very small class, I managed to get to like the 10th position, but, couldn't break really past that point. I remember with the basketball team, practiced so hard to get on the team, and got on the team, but never played a game. I remember in baseball, being a very good fielder, but could never hit the ball. So I always kind of felt like, home of the second best growing up. And I think probably that is at the root of it all, which is a desire to, if you look at the definition of world class, by definition, it means of or amongst the best. And so I've always wanted that feeling, right, of being of or amongst the best. And probably similar to an Olympic athlete, well, why do they want to win a gold medal or take a shot at it? Because they want to, they have that competitive spirit. They want to be of and amongst the best. And same for me.
I wonder if as well, it's when you get out into the sort of big wide world, there's just more flexibility with that. And that's why you found those things. So, when you're at school, it is about, being top of the class or being the best sportsman and or the best musician and or the most popular. There's probably only about 4 things that we think we need to be when we're at school. But once we're out in the sort of wider world, that those opportunities are there. Maybe having that sort of drive opens you up to all sorts of possibilities, because that gives you that opportunity. I'm sort of waffling in my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, I think having that desire to reach your full potential definitely does open up a world of possibilities, because there's so many different avenues that you can pursue to do that.
Yes.
And although all the paths can be different, there is a commonality across them all, which is, you have to find within whatever industry that you're in or line of work, if you want to achieve mastery within that industry or reach your full potential, you have to really zero in on, what's the 80-20? Like, what are the 20% of the things that you could focus on from a skill development or, from a business building point of view that will create 80%, the benefits that you're seeking. Really, really zero in on that. Carve that time into your calendar to work on those things. And then the thing for me that I've always done, no matter what position I was in or where I was in my career, is just constantly reaching out to others, specialists, experts, others who have kind of gone before you or are doing, or operating at a level that you aspire to be at, and just trying to just download as much of that wisdom as possible, and then just apply it as quickly as possible. Because if you just, when I was growing up, it was like, knowledge is power, knowledge is power. Knowledge isn't power anymore.
No, that's
Google anything in seconds. Translating knowledge into action. So just applying it. But I think it really does open up a world of possibilities, for mastery, if you will.
Yes. Yeah. So what do your days look like? How do you work with your clients? And I mean, I've been asking that for months now, and everyone's like, well, I'm in my home.
Yeah.
And that's about, the first 50% of it. But what would it look like if we weren't in lockdown, and what does it look like now?
So I used to meet clients on occasion in person before lockdown, but as a result of lockdown, obviously I'm not doing that. And furthermore, I will never return to doing that. So, even if that means having to lose a current client or not take on a new, that's fine.
Yes.
It's what this has all highlighted to me is just how incredibly inefficient it is to spend 2 hours to go meet someone for 1 hour, say, 1 hour each way. And I, you got one life to live here, and time is the only thing that you don't get back. And so I'm just not, the lockdown has just put me in a position where I am not prepared to sacrifice that time anymore. And I totally get isn't there something to have, those in-person connections? And I get that. And I've just chosen that going forward, I'll prioritize where I want in-person connections, and that's with my family and friends, and professionally, I'll keep it online, which also works very nicely with where we're moving to next, because we'll be heading over to Lisbon, Portugal soon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that will be home in the not too distant future.
Yes, and that from a Brazilian language point of view, it all fits together nicely.
It all fits together just perfectly. Yes, that will all work out fine on the language front.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting. You say about the not meeting in person. It's something that I have done because you have to, or you did have to. And I said at the beginning of lockdown, people are finally where I want them to be. They're online, which is what I would have always preferred. It'd be interesting to see how many choices we have to make afterwards, as you say, to where we potentially lose opportunities because we're not prepared to go back to that sort of in-person thing. Lots of people I think will have the same sort of view of, this is a new world and this is the way I'm going to work moving forwards, and I know I can do that. But I think there's quite a chunk of people who actually are waiting to have those opportunities again because they think that's the only way or the best way. And I agree with you. I don't think it is the best way in lots of cases, particularly from a time management point of view, productivity point of view.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's plenty of fish in the sea. So for those who say no, there'll be plenty who say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that at a high level in terms of like how I actually work with clients, I'll typically do a kickoff session for a few hours, all online again, as we've said. And then thereafter, super simple. I just do 50-minute sessions every 2 weeks, and then continue on, with the coaching relationship as long as it's valuable for both sides, right? And so it's super simple like that. And then the other thing I've done recently is I've started to turn my coaching into a product, and so I turned the peak performance side of it rather than the business coaching side of it into a self-study program. And so that's proving, that's very exciting and interesting, because it will allow us to bring a lot of scale to the whole thing. So we're looking at expanding in that way too.
So across all of that, do you think, you mentioned that you sort of specialize in the sort of more tech world? Do you think all of that sort of fits with that, helps that anyway? I would imagine sort of tech founders and tech organizations are more online. They're more, obviously.
Oh yeah.
They're more up for online coaching. They're more up for a different way of things, because that's the nature of their business.
Yeah, exactly. So they're used to working in remote environments. They're probably we're already doing it to some degree before lockdown. So they definitely are, of the type that is looking for efficient execution on the coaching front. So that's maybe well, in lockdown it kind of doesn't matter because it has to be that way. But I guess that might make it easier to maintain things that way going forward. But again, I think that there's so many people out there that I can't really see it being an issue for anyone, because you can always find people who would be willing to be coached online.
Yeah, absolutely. I was interviewing somebody recently who talked about in fact, I can't even remember who it was or what the story was, but it was something like trauma counselling or that sort of thing, and the people were actually enjoying it online more because they don't have to leave their house and sort of get out of their comfortable place in order to have that sort of treatment, which in the past they would have had to have done. They would have had to have gone, half an hour down the road into a strange building and everything else. And actually the familiarity of having that help in their own home, albeit via Zoom or whatever, was actually helping them. And those sorts of things, I don't think anyone would have ever particularly thought of or done something with, but for this situation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, also conflict situations where you're trying to resolve conflict between people. I've had some experiences where it feels like it's been a lot easier to do online than if everyone were in the same room. And so I think the distance, oddly, in certain situations can really help.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Interesting. So how do you manage what you need to get done? Are you very techie, or are you one of my pen and paper people, which like 99% of my guests are? But come on, you're in a tech world. You must do tech.
Well, so I use we use Asana for our project management, and that's excellent for that.
Yes.
We're big into using Google Docs and Google Sheets to keep everything shareable between team members. And outside of that, though, I used to religiously use a written kind of planner all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing: I used it so much that I ended up getting like carpal tunnel in my hand or wrist, or just was not able to write. And so I actually had to stop writing in the planner. And that's been really enlightening because, again, from, I used the term 80-20 before. From an 80-20 point of view, it's like 20% of the effort for, 80% of the benefit. So when I was using that planner, it was like 100% of effort for 100% benefit. So it's almost like allowing the perfectionist in me to, have full reign.
Yeah.
And now, because, I'm quite limited and want to avoid writing while my hand heals, I basically just using my calendar and scheduling anything that I want to do as an appointment with myself in my calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been super helpful, super enlightening. My planning is so much, it happens so much more quickly.
Yeah.
I'm achieving even more than I was in the past because I'm spending less time planning and more time doing. So I'm still doing the planning, but it's just more action oriented.
Yes.
Than kind of overthinking.
Yes. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm just chuckling because I was talking recently about how one of my previous team used to tell me that if I was as good at doing the job as I was at planning stuff, I'd be really good. And I've always chosen to see that as a compliment disguised as some feedback. But I still don't know whether she actually it was a big criticism. But yeah, you can get tied up in organizing and planning and having everything color coded and all that sort of stuff and actually achieve nothing, can't you?
So much. And if you can just, it's all about action at the end of the day. I mean, you need a little bit of planning and a lot of action.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting. One of the things I used to do when I was going into London a lot and doing other things was I would put on my, I used Todoist as my to-do list, and I'd tag stuff by whether I was going to do it on my phone or my iPad or my laptop, because I'd have them for different reasons. So obviously my phone was always with me, and if I was on the train it would be easier to use my phone, and my laptop would tend to be when I was at home or whatever. And I've just realized recently that those are really not necessary tags anymore, because I'm at home all the time and my MacBook's quite small. I could just use that pretty much for all of it. There's none of this, I'm here, I've only got my phone available, what can I do on my phone stuff? I now, can lazily say, well, I'll just do it all on my laptop anyway, because I'm never away from it now, which is odd how it's changed, how I organize myself because of the fact that I just don't leave the house with my equipment anymore.
And it's, I think whatever the simplest way is for people to know what the top 3 things that they're doing on a daily basis and when you're going to do them, like that for me is like the simplest way to think about your to-do list or planning, or whether or not you need tech and to what degree you should be using tech or writing things down. You just try to keep it super, super simple.
Yeah. So that's a good one. Your sort of top 3 tasks. What other tips have you got for us for peak performance? This is like the 3-minute version.
Yeah. So I would suggest, so if you want to see a big change in your productivity, then I would design 3 routines into your day. So first is evening routine. So start in the evening, because a productive day actually begins the night before rather than the morning of. So starts with a good night's sleep. So the key thing there is have a digital sunset. So 1 hour before you go to bed, such that you can get 8 hours of sleep, just shut off all the electronics, because any electronic light going into your eyes in that hour before bed will lower your melatonin production by about 50%, which will inhibit your ability to sleep a full 8 hours, or if you do, as restoratively as you should. And then that has a knock-on effect on your productivity. So start with an evening routine, and specifically a digital sunset an hour before bed. Maybe set it up as an alarm on your phone. When that alarm goes off, shut off all the electronics, including your phone. Get an old school alarm clock from Amazon rather than use your phone to wake you up. So that's the evening routine. Then in the morning, I would just focus on being creative before reactive. So instead of starting your day in your inbox or on social media or browsing the news or going into Slack or whatever other apps you use, for the first hour of the day, just work on one of your top three, creative output kind of tasks for the day.
Yeah.
And then the last routine would be a workday routine. And the simplest thing I'd recommend there is try dividing your day up into maker versus manager time. So don't schedule any meetings in the morning. Instead, keep all of your meetings, internal and external, clustered in the afternoons. And while your energy and your focus is typically at its highest in the morning, keep that free to work on all the things that you should be doing from the perspective of working on the business rather than in it, but that you aren't getting enough time to do. If you just keep your mornings free like that, suddenly you have all the time to do it.
I really like that one. I corral all my meetings into the afternoons. Mind you, because I'm a night bird, I don't have much of the morning.
Right. Okay.
I do a lot of mine at ridiculous times at night, which traumatizes people. I've got a student in Australia who I'm on WhatsApp with, and he'll quite often send me a message and I'll reply. And then his next reply is loads of like shocked faces going, "Why are you still awake? Go to bed."
Yeah.
He doesn't get that actually I'm wide awake and I won't be getting up till 10 o'clock the next day. So it'll be fine. He's an early person, so he can't quite get his head around that. But
So what's like a typical late night for you then? How late might you stay up?
I probably don't get to bed before 2, and then I often read. So quite often it might be even later than that, which goes against all of the stuff about quality of sleep before 12 and everything else. But I get my sleep. I just don't get up in the morning. It's a bit odd in our house. My daughter's at school at 8:45 in the dining room. My husband starts work at 9, and I'm hopefully still asleep at that stage. And actually, for all the sort of whys and wherefores about lockdown, it's really helped, because quite often when she goes to school, they actually wake me up at 8:30 because I'm a light sleeper, and then that knocks the whole thing out, obviously, because I've had really short amount of sleep at that stage. So actually for us this is working quite well, because they're quite good at creeping downstairs when they haven't got to leave the house.
Oh, well, yeah. And that's, so whatever, I think that's the important thing too, is that people realize that there is no, there isn't the way. There's lots of ways, and you got to collect your own data, try them out, experiment, see what works for you. And if that works for you, then that's great. Right. So that's I can definitely relate too, because sometimes I've found that like some of my best periods of reading have come when I've gotten into this like night owl phase.
Yeah.
And because if you start reading something good, and if you could tear through a book between like midnight and 3 a.m.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's interesting as well what you were saying about sort of that whole intentionality, of picking those times and knowing them, because for me, I have to be really aware of the things that sort of detract and add to my planning. So at the moment I've been reading a sort of fiction book series, and I had to have a good stern talking to myself to not read it when I go to bed, because then I can't go to sleep because I want to keep reading, and then I end up staying up too late. So I've been saying to myself, right, I'm going to read a business book, because I know I can only manage normally one chapter and then I'm sleepy enough to go to sleep. And your routines, changing your routines to drive you to do the things that you want to do, to reinforce that is so important, I think. And being aware and changing them when they're not working any longer is really key as well.
Yeah, totally agree. It's you shouldn't be wed to one thing, and just try things out, see what works, and keep the core stuff that is working.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, it's that sort of rule of 3 you gave, your evening routine, your morning routine, and your middle of the day routine, job done.
Yeah, exactly. Boom, done. Efficient, peak performance.
See, it's easy. I don't know why people think that there's a problem with getting things done. It's just there.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about learning and improving yourself? I'm sure you do lots of that. What sort of resources do you use for that? How do you make that happen?
My number one thing is just reading. So I constantly keep an eye out for new and interesting books. I read regularly throughout the week. I read paper books. I'm like an underliner and write notes in the margin sort of person.
Yeah.
And the other thing I have a habit of doing is that as I'm reading something, if I think something's interesting and I want to like apply it, then I'll make a note of it and turn it into a to-do and actually do whatever it is. And that's the best way to learn, is to actually apply whatever you're reading and see what happens. So that's one thing, is reading. The other thing that I try to do is just share things, with others, social media, in conversation. The act of sharing, you end up getting a 2-for-1 in that. Sharing, for example, versus summarizing something, you're going to get a 90% versus like a 10% on average retention when you share or teach something to someone else. So that's going to improve the learning for you. Time, when I say a 2-for-1, you're helping someone else at the same time. So you could do it purely selfishly, just for yourself, so that you're actually learning more, but you'll also be helping someone else at the same time. So so reading, and then just trying to share, / teach what I'm learning to others.
Yeah, definitely. And just moving to the last couple of questions then. Firstly, what about those days where it goes horribly wrong? How do you deal with those days?
Well, I expect them to happen, and for them to happen regularly. That's point one.
Yeah.
The number of days out of 365 that go to plan for me in a year, I don't know, maybe 5. A day, the norm is a day not going to plan. I don't mean like completely off plan, like I blew a tire and the car flipped on its roof. But it's like small things, and your mood's not even as you had planned it to be. So I just expect that to be the norm, things not going to plan. And when they're seriously off, then I often just look to the fundamentals. So if the day was seriously off, so where was I seriously off? Was it my sleep? Have I not been exercising as much as I should be lately? Am I eating poorly? Am I not planning enough so that every day feels like I'm holding on to the back of a train rather than driving it? I would just say I expect it, and when it does go wrong, I look back to kind of like the core fundamentals for reasons why.
I love that metaphor of the train hanging rather than driving it. I think we could all identify with that.
Yeah, I mean, and you could picture yourself on the back, right? Your hair is just blowing in the wind.
Yeah, I was there. I can imagine that. Yeah. Brilliant. Lovely. And what about those days where you get to live more, and that's where you get to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do? What do those days look like for you?
I'd say there's 2 types. So one is, it's just like a pure day off. And it happens just because you choose it, or perhaps it chooses you in some way, shape, or form. But you're just able to just sit back and not worry about anything, and read a little, or watch something on TV, or go out for a walk, or so you get this like random little gift that happens. Those are quite nice. And then the other time is when I'm in that pure kind of creative mode, and I'm able to kind of build or make something, not having to do a lot of the admin-y kind of things. So those days are quite special too.
Yeah, lovely. So thank you, Eric. It's been so good talking to you today. I really enjoyed it. Tell people how they can find out more about you and get in contact.
Yeah, sure. So I've written a book recently, and so if you'd like to go into much greater depth on peak performance, on realizing your full potential, some of the concepts that I've discussed here, as a thank you for listening up to this point. How did I know that you're listening up to this point? Magic, huh? So as a thank you for listening up to this point, if you head over to my website, you can get a free digital copy of my new book, The 3 Alarms, which has achieved bestseller status on Amazon. And that's just at Eric with a C, Partaker.com. And that's also the best way to get in touch too.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you. All right.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com/ in this case 210, then you'll find them there. And this week I'd like to talk to you about content marketing. The first thing we talked about at the Gold Calm call this week was about what content marketing is, and I talked about how many years ago, back in the early days of websites, blogging, social media, a company called HubSpot, I think, coined the phrase inbound marketing. And that was quite a new concept, differing from usual marketing where you'd go out and sort of advertise and put yourself in front of people and tell them what you were doing, if you like. It was a new way of doing that by actually creating really useful content and learning to draw people in to demonstrate your expertise so that then they would ask you for help with whatever it is that you have just demonstrated that you're able to do for them. So inbound marketing came along when blogging started to become really popular, and then social media came about, and I guess the rest is history. So content marketing for me is all about creating content in whatever form that attracts, informs and teaches your audience, as well as showcasing you and your knowledge and experience. And I think the key to doing it is, well, there's two things I think. Firstly, it's about finding the format that suits you, or the formats, maybe more than one, that suits you and enables you to consistently create that content, as well as suiting your potential audience. So you've got to get that combination of the both. But I think if you don't find content that you enjoy making and creating, then it's really hard to keep doing that consistently. You might do it really well for a number of weeks or months, but if it's something that you don't really enjoy and you're not really very good at and doesn't really sort of float your boat, then it's actually really hard to keep it going. And the other point is that with content marketing, it's really helpful if you can repurpose your content. So that's where you create one piece of content and then you turn it into other formats so that you're not constantly creating new content and having to come up with new ideas. So for example, you could record a video and then transcribe it and turn it into a blog post. You could chop that up into smaller sections to post on social media. You could use it in your newsletter and so on. And again, that's another way of enabling you to consistently publish and create content for your audience without it becoming too onerous for you. And this is a good example in that I set a theme for my month, a topic for each week. At my member call on a Monday, we talk about that topic. I then transcribe it. I have some content for them, which is the notes that I make from the transcription and also the video of the call, and that goes into my membership site. And then I record my outro for my podcast, the thing that you're listening to now, using the notes from that. And then I also put something into my newsletter that relates to that content as well. So I've taken one piece of content, in fact one idea, and turned it into a number of pieces of content. And I can do that every week fairly easily because there's a process, there's a shape, there's a consistent way of creating that built into this process that I've created. And then the last tip, I think, is to make sure that when you are creating content that you do always have a clear call to action. So people take that content, they find some use from it, they are impressed with your knowledge and your experience and your abilities around that particular piece of content that you've created. And then if they want to take the next step and they want to find out more about you or get in contact with you, there is a way for them to do that. So it would be remiss of me not to mention now my membership site if you want to find out more about it. If you want to be on these gold calls that we have on a Monday where we take the topic and we talk around the subject, I share thoughts and ideas and tips and strategies, other people share their experiences, and then people can take that information away and use it in their own businesses. If you want to find out more about a membership where there's courses and there's materials that you can download, there's templates, there's checklists, there's lots of information that you can use for whatever it is you are looking to do at that time, including in this case lots of content marketing materials like content marketing planners and a content upgrade checklist.
and a whole series of blog templates and so on, then please go to powertolivemore.com/get calm and you can find out more about the membership there. And if you use the code please let me in, then you can get the first month free. Again, the show notes for this week's show are at powertolivemore.com/210, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.